spectacular results come from unspectacular preparation. If you talk to guys who have been successful at any level, at anything, it's like, oh yeah, I did that. And, in the off season, I did this. And, when I was home at night, I would, go through my email and flag things to follow up in the morning or do this or do that. And people just don't know what's happening in the background. I mean, I'd say it's like running a marathon, right? You don't go out and run 26 miles in 3 hours. You start and it takes a while. What sports teaches you, and, the Navy, I'm sure, is you can't cram, right? For some reason, when we're all in college, we think 3 nights before the test, we can get ready for it. And when we got to school, we had to run 2 miles was like our fitness test for baseball. And you can't cram for that, right? Like you have to be running all summer or you're going to bomb it, right? It takes time. You can't get to that level by just making a cold call on Friday and getting hired on Monday.
Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Good.
Doing well.
I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come over to the C-Suite show today. All the way to North Dallas. Like you guys came north of 635. How does it feel
I grew up north of 635. So
did you? You feel all right up here?
I used to walk this. I was a mall rat at the Galleria.
Was it Galleria or actually Valley View back in the day?
Well, Valley View I rode my bike to, and then Galleria I would get like dropped off in 7th grade. And we still joke. We don't know how it happened, like how you coordinated without phones, but we would pull up to the entrance, get dropped off, and somehow or another we'd walk out and the car would be there to pick us up.
Certain time.
Or a payphone. You got to be here at 9 o'clock. And
yes. Isn't it remarkable how things used to happen?
Now you're looking, like if your kid's at the mall, you're like looking at their Life 360, like, okay, it looks like they're in that store. Yeah.
Oh, they're over in the arcade. Get out of there. There's bad kids in the arcade.
It's crazy how much it's changed.
Really has. I mean, you could, the rule for me was just like be home by sundown, right? Before the
street lights turn on.
Street lights turn on, right?
No idea where you were.
Yeah, right. It's wild. Well, anyhow, thanks for coming on today, gents. We've known each other. All of us have known y'all have known each other longer. We've probably known each other for 5, 6, 7 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to know one another. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys got to know one another. You want to talk a little bit about that story?
Sure.
You can start.
I, coming out of the Navy, I went to work for the Staubach Company at the end of 2000. I got hired at the end of 2007 and was hired initially as an analyst supporting the office tenant rep group.
Doing the little wheel rotation or what have you?
We didn't have, we had like a caller, like you kind of started out, it was like trying to set meetings.
Okay. Was that what you were doing?
No.
Market surveys.
Or the free agent program, right?
Before that, it was just.
That's right.
I wasn't even on the calling program. I was just, it's just scary to think, but I was running numbers. Running numbers for everybody. And
ProCalc.
ProCalc. Running ProCalc for everybody and putting together market surveys.
Okay.
And I was doing that for probably 6, 7, 8 months. And then the
market collapsed.
Then the merger happened.
Yeah.
Merger was like July of 08.
Mm-hmm.
And
the market collapsed.
And then the market collapsed in September. But
perfect timing.
It actually is.
It really kind of is.
It's good to start in a bad market.
I agree.
Because you're not going to make any money anyway.
That's right.
A couple years in.
The COO of JLL walked into my office at the time, and he was like, "You've been doing this analyst thing for, 6, 7 months now?" Yeah, because you're a broker now. Go get after it.
Is that Rick?
It was David Carroll.
Oh, Carroll. Oh, yeah, that was, yeah.
He was like, you're a broker. Go
figure it out. Here's your draw.
Figure it out.
Yeah. So, but to Jeff's point, it was a very difficult time in the market, obviously, but you don't know.
You don't know any different.
You don't know any different.
No.
And
I mean, I got in the business right after 9/11. Jeff, probably about the same time. Right? You don't know any better. You're just like, let me get out there and block and tackle.
Yeah. Knock on doors and
So you gravitated to the office team. Jeff, you were rocking and rolling probably about this
I was
time.
probably, I was 5 or 6 years in. I don't know what my title was, VP. I mean, I was low level. I was doing kind of the next level up from Steven. So
Yeah.
what we had was it was called a free agent. There were some sports themes, as you can imagine. But the free agent program is where most people started.
Yeah.
And all that meant was you could be brought in on any deal, any team, and you didn't have to get paid on the deal, right? We didn't have a draw. I mean, you got paid.
Yeah.
If you didn't earn it back, you didn't have to pay it back.
Right.
And I remember describing it to my wife when I was joining the brokerage team, and she's like, that doesn't seem fair. Like at first, when you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, but it exposes you to every broker, every type of deal.
Yep.
Typically, it's in your business line, so you're not doing industrial stuff if
Yeah.
you're an office guy or vice versa. But the other thing is it creates a resume. So when I was
Sure.
5 years in, I had worked on Hager, the big Hager reload
Yeah.
with Paul. I had worked a little bit on Radio Shack with Paul. I had worked on, these big deals that you normally wouldn't
Right.
work on. So when you're 35, you can say, hey, here's my resume. I worked on this, and this, and
Yeah.
you look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Take it
it's-
till you make it.
yeah, and it's typically depending on your time in the business. I mean, Brad Sellner, when he came over from CB, he was like the number one rookie at CB, 3 or 4 years into the business. He started as a free agent.
Wow.
And so it's 6 to 18 months, depending on how long you've been in the business. And then like Steven said, it's like, okay, time's up. But again, it wasn't like, okay, now it's feast or famine. You're on a draw. You're going to have to pay it back. It's, it's, hey, we want you to be successful, and we don't want you struggling to make ends meet and, chasing bad deals just to try and find a deal. And I mean, out of that program, if you look around the city, there's, 10 or 12 extremely successful brokers. Tory Littlejohn, Brooke Armstrong, Jeremy McGowan, Andy Leatherman, Brad Sellner, Steven, me, Josh White. A lot of people came through that program.
Sure.
And the other thing, I remember Brad telling me, because he had just rolled off a free agency, and so I worked with Brad a lot, is he said, you learn kind of what works for you and what works for other people. So if Paul Whitman does it this way and that works for you, okay. If Steve Thielen worked with Steve a lot, if Steve does it that way, if Carl does it that way, and so you kind of pull what works for you from, I was not a huge cold caller. I just tried to leverage relationships into warm calls. And so some guys, when Ellerman was 40 years old, he was still banging the phones and cold calling. Where I was like, all right, I'm going to figure out like who knows that guy, and before LinkedIn and all that stuff. I think it was easier back then because people answered the phone.
Yes.
They took meetings, and I feel bad for vendors now because I get vendor requests 30 times a week, whether it's a carpet guy or this guy or an HR guy or whatever, and I just don't have time.
No.
And so unless it comes through, if Steven called me and said, hey, my cousin's in commercial contracting, will you meet with him and talk about your project? Well, yeah, of course I'm going to do it. But
that was like the golden era of the office sector too.
And you don't want to know what's crazy is when Jeff was actually, I remember we used to have Tuesday morning meetings weekly at
7:30.
7:30.
Every Tuesday, like probably 48 times a year.
Yep. And I'll never forget a Tuesday morning meeting that Jeff was running, and he came in and talking about this new thing called LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And how you use it, and it's like the Facebook for business professionals and linking with people. And anyway, just
and there was a time where I was one of the LinkedIn experts at JLL, and so I presented it, talked about it, and now it's just so full.
It's wild.
I what I did is I never accepted vendors, and I remember telling the brokers, I'm like, hey, that might be rude. It might be, but I said, LinkedIn is for business development. It's not for charity, and charity is another thing. Do all you want, and it's great, but it's not for you connecting with the contractor or the furniture vendor, because they're not going to help you get new business. Said you can be friends, and and so I was pretty specific about who I would connect with and who I wouldn't, because I was like, this is for business development. Period. Now it's just full. Everyone's on it, and it's hard.
It's a little saturated today. Steven, when you get started, So when the COO of JLL says, all right, become a broker, is there any guidance of like, okay, go focus on uptown or downtown?
No, luckily, so when I started on the analyst program, the other thing that I always like to tell people is coming out of the Naval Academy, going into the SEAL teams, or, playing football, then going into the SEAL teams, 100% male kind of team-oriented environment. And then I roll into this analyst program, and I was sitting in a room with, I think, 5 or 6 other females.
Right.
It's just completely different experience for me, but a phenomenal experience.
Right.
And when David walked in, luckily I had kind of, I was doing the work that I needed to do to support other brokers, but I was still making time to either go walk buildings, knock on doors, make calls, try to figure out, relationships and how you could leverage that. So it wasn't like starting from zero when he walked in.
Sure.
I at least had been thinking about it a little bit, but no geography, no.
Okay. So leveraging relationships for the most part.
Well,
I mean, were we stacking buildings? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stacking buildings, a lot of knock on doors. There was a lot more cold calling.
Not doing that anymore. These elevators, and security.
Yeah, no, it's hard.
That was one of the fun games was,
how long before you get kicked out?
Can you avoid the security guard?
And what kind of BS did you have when you got confronted and,
right.
Being able to talk your way out of it. So,
and some guys, I mean, like I never was the person that would just go knock on a door, like walk up to a suite, and knock on the door and say, can I meet the decision maker? But I mean, people were doing that up until really the new elevator bank systems, the security.
Sure. Now you got to get almost cards.
And CoStar was not where it is today, right? It wasn't as accurate. You didn't have the relationship. I mean, now most of these brokers can call their buddy who leases the building and get a lot of the info, and they take them to lunch or something.
Yeah.
We always used to try to grease the skids with the receptionist.
Oh, for sure.
Send flowers and stuff.
Flowers. Tiff treats was a go-to. And once she kind of put,
I mean, if you're
he or she, but more often than not, she put, your face with whatever you were sending her on a monthly basis. It helped. We won some business that way. I think the first full floor law firm I was hired on came out of
Tiff Street.
Forshy and I knocking on doors and getting in the door with the receptionist with Tiff treats.
It was bigger in industrial. Industrial was easier.
It still happens
to knock on the door because like the decision maker might be sitting there.
Well, and there's no security guards policing the truck courts, right? You know, so I mean, those industrial guys are still living on the streets, and knocking on doors.
And for me, I'm not a natural extrovert, so being forced to do that, was a great exercise, and getting out of your comfort zone and figuring out how to make that work for you.
Yeah, the thing, like the cold calling, I mean, you really have to have a plan. Some people are just shotgun all day, every day, hoping for an answer.
Yeah, we know those firms,
and we didn't have ACT, and we were using Outlook, so there wasn't a great system, and so you're kind of tracking it on spreadsheets. And I remember calling this one guy named Omar Shakir. I see him every now and then, and man, I called him probably 20 times, and my son was born, and he's 21. And the birth announcement was at my mother-in-law's desk. She was working at a public school, kind of semi-retirement.
Yeah.
And his wife saw the birth announcement, and it said Robert Joseph Staubach. And she's like, "Who's that?" Right? And she goes, "Oh, that's my grandson." And she goes, I think his dad is calling my husband. Like he had told his wife
that this guy
how
will
many
not
times
shake.
I had called this guy. And so my mother-in-law calls me that night, and she's like, "Hey, I met Omar's wife. You need to call him tomorrow. He's going to take a meeting."
That's so great.
And so I get a meeting, and
did you win the deal?
We got hired, and so there's like the serendipitous, and another story I tell young people is I was Joe, who's now 21, when he was a baby. I was driving home from work. We officed in Addison, exited Northwest Highway, and I had been calling a guy who had opened the Houlihan Lokey office, who's now an investor of mine. Think about 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And I'd been calling him, nothing. And I got invited to their opening, their office, their big opening party for Dallas, and it was down at the Belo Mansion. And so I'm like, I'm not going. There's going to be 500 people there. Like it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I literally exited Northwest Highway, and sitting at the light, I thought, you know what? I need to go. I need to show up. So I get back on the tollway, go down to the Belo, 500 people. I mean, the place is jam packed. I don't even know really what Rick looks like because it's pre,
internet,
Google image search, everybody. Right. And I find him. I walk up to him, say hi, introduce myself, talk to his partners, and then boop, sneak out. And I'm there for maybe 20 minutes, and we end up getting hired. Right. And it's like those little things that some people are willing to do that others aren't. That, you're like, how'd you get hired on that deal? You're like, well, I don't even really know. I did this, I did that. And, it's blocking, tackling, and then, kind of those.
It's easy to point to something like that, say that's luck. But when you just,
no, it's not. Yeah.
Just doing the little things over and over and over. And
I call it like red zone offense, right? Like a lot of people can get into the red zone.
Can you punch it in?
Yeah. Can you get in from there? Because there's dozens of guys. I mean, Josh White and I got hired on a pretty big deal one time, and it was a Jesuit guy. So we had a connection, and I'd been calling him and, talking to him, and he like wouldn't take the meeting. Like I couldn't get him to, commit.
Yeah. Finally,
we just said, we're going down there. And so Josh and I go down to the Info Mart, bang on the door. We sit down with him, and he goes, you guys are the first guys that have showed up. It was like he was waiting for someone to like,
take the initiative.
Yeah, make an effort. Yeah, we get hired, and it ends up being a nice deal. And
that's incredible.
And again, there's so much luck involved, but it's also we used to have a trainer named Bill Moore who'd come in and teach getting into the C-suite, and he always used the term serendipity.
Yeah.
Right. That it's luck and hard work kind of meet together, and
sure.
You bump into somebody, or you go to a dinner that you didn't really want to go to, and you see somebody, or it's a little. Typically, when you don't want to do it and you should, then
you should. Yeah.
Right. It's like, all right, I got to go to that happy hour. It's been a long day, but
I know. Yeah. You got a little gas left in the tank. Mm-hmm. David Goggins would say you have like 80% left in the tank, right? Wouldn't he? I mean, did you and Goggins ever hang out back in the day?
We went through. Goggins was in the Buds class behind me.
Okay.
The class that he ended up graduating with was 235, and then we both of our first assignments were at SEAL Team 5. So, did a couple deployments together. And
is he a lunatic then?
You know what? I
in a nice way. I say lunatic in a nice way.
Yeah, in a nice way.
I think.
Don't kill me, David Goggins.
No, he was not Goggins as we know Goggins today. That happened. That switch kind of flipped, being the casual observer. I think 2005 when Operation Red Wing happened and we lost those guys in Afghanistan. He thought, what can I do to raise money for these kids and these widows? And he started down that ultra endurance, crazy path.
Yeah.
And it's literally because running was his least favorite thing to do in the world, and he just wanted to punish himself.
Yeah.
For a good cause, obviously.
Right.
But I think it was in 2006. I hadn't seen him in a year, and I've told people this story. I was walking through the weight room at SEAL Team 5, coming off a deployment.
So do y'all all have separate weight rooms? Like, do you not hang out together like all the SEAL teams, or how does that work?
Well, initially all the teams had their own, but in about 04, 05, the West Coast went through this major infrastructure transformation.
Okay.
And all the West Coast.
Odd numbers.
Yeah, all the odd numbers, I believe, had this centralized, very nice weight room.
Got it.
So I came off a deployment and was walking through this new facility, and this guy walked past me, and I got to like here to there, and I was like, wait a minute, David? And he'd always been, however tall he is, 6'1", 6'2", 210, 15, 20. He was always a bigger guy, not heavy, but big.
Yeah, right.
He walked past me probably when, I don't know, 185, 190. and it looked like he was chiseled out of stone. He was just shredded, ripped.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't recognize him.
Right.
It was just a different profile.
Built like Conrad.
Very similar.
Very similar.
But literally, I was like,
25 years ago.
Holy shit. What's going on? And so, I mean, he went through a transformation pretty quickly, but
Yeah.
it's been amazing to watch from afar the brand that he's built and obviously the success that he's had, because
Sold a couple books.
his story is, you can't make that up.
No.
Have you seen the cartoon of when Elon Musk lands on Mars?
And he's out there.
He's out there running.
Oh, no, I haven't.
So Elon lands on Mars, right? And he's got that.
Goggins.
And there's like 5 people in the ship in the helmet, and he's like, "You're the first people ever to be on Mars." And Goggins goes running by. He's like, "Hey!" Yeah. No helmet, no.
That is so great.
He's like shirtless running by.
Yeah. I tell you what, though, man, that book for me is like one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. Like probably 5-6 years ago, I read it, and it literally reprogrammed my brain.
You realize you really don't have any excuse.
No.
On any level.
On any level. 100%.
I was listening to it when I did the Baton Memorial Death March for the first time, and it's a marathon up at the Las Cruces White Sands Missile Range.
Okay.
And I remember, and I'm like, listen, like this is crazy. I mean, I got blisters and things, and I'm like, okay, well, I gotta like keep pushing on because this guy is
right.
I mean, the stories.
I mean, it's kind of my mantra now is like, just don't ever like.
I'm wondering
and
when
it's just little daily tasks,
right.
like little things, like just finish the job. Just back in the day, if I was planting flowers right out in the flower bed, I got tired, I'd be like, I'll get to the rest of them tomorrow. Just little stupid stuff like that. Now I'm just like, dude, just knock it out and be done, and then you don't have to worry about it tomorrow.
Yep.
I'm
wondering when I'm sure they're working on a movie at some point.
Has to. Maybe a guest appearance for Mr. Holley.
Yeah,
in there,
maybe so.
So that's interesting. Well, Jeff, I don't even know if I've told you this story, but I lived in Addison Circle way back in the day. Do you know this story?
No.
Have I told you? But that's how I got in the business in commercial real estate, was through the Staubach Company. So in my 20s, I was, a lot thinner than I am today, but I was living in the gym every day after work, right?
Oh yeah, the old Trophy Fitness.
Yeah, or whatever it was called.
Yeah, Post Fitness, and then it became Trophy Fitness.
And so the office building shared that same gym with the apartments, and so I was in there every day, and I would see all the Staubach brokers in there, and I just saw how they dressed, how they carried themselves. They just oozed success.
Suits back then.
Yeah, suits, right?
Yes.
And then, in the parking garage, every one of those guys was driving an S-Class Mercedes that was leaving, right? And I just was like, these guys are doing something right. And so I got close with Scott Collier, who was it was in the gym forever. And we went to lunch. And afterwards, he took me up to the offices. And I'm just like,
And we probably met or bumped into each other.
No. Scott was like, well, we're trying to grow the industrial division. Let me go put you, and they put me in Tom Lynn's office. And I'm going to tell this story right now. But Tom could have cared that I was sitting there that day. But after, and maybe he had a bad day or a bad phone call. But anyhow, he passed me down the hallway, and I got to Tom McCarthy's office. And Tom McCarthy gave me time, and he gave me advice, and he didn't know.
Advice?
Great advice.
I've known Tom.
Tommy is great. Yes,
like 35
Yes,
years.
right. And but he gave me guidance. Like, hey, don't. They had hired Brant Landry to be their
So that's
rotational guy.
like when I started.
And so Tom was like, we don't have really anything here, but don't go here, don't go here. You can use my name to open up doors here, maybe some good firms. But literally, that was my first step, and then I just started cold calling all those firms that Tommy told me to call, and here I am 20 some years later. But literally, it was because of just chance, right, of living in Addison Circle that I somehow got.
That was fun. That gym, we had a big group that worked out at lunch, and it was fun.
Yeah.
So you were talking about back in the day, it was suits, right?
Oh yeah.
There was a period of time I would ride my bike to work, and I would on Sunday nights, and I would go back and forth from home. And so on Sunday nights, I'd drive my car to the parking garage, and I would coordinate a week's worth of suits and hang them
in the locker room.
and take them up there and then hang them in the locker room. But
That's
thinking about it today, I'll never forget my first Friday. I walk in a suit. I'd been there for 4 days, and then everyone's wearing a sport coat, and I'm like, okay, I didn't get the memo. You can wear a sport coat on Friday.
Well, JLL, I mean, Staubach was ties
4 days a week.
Oh yeah,
except Memorial Day to Labor Day. But if you had a meeting with a client, you were still in a suit.
Sure.
But you didn't have to wear it, when it was 106.
Yeah.
And it was fairly enforced.
Oh, yeah.
I remember if guys came back from golf tournaments or something and they were dressed like I'm dressed, in a golf shirt, it was kind of like, hey,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? It's Tuesday. Well, I came from the Trek, I remember like, a guy at his desk in shorts after a golf tournament,
right.
and Alicia was a stickler. It's funny, my dad was in a suit every day, like, up through JLL, and he never said boo about it. But when JLL bought us, they were business casual. And we could actually do jeans Friday.
Yeah.
Because like there were no jeans on Friday at Staubach except for like blue jeans for babies. You gave $20 and you could wear jeans on Friday, or we had spring fling or something. But yeah, jeans on Friday was a big. Now people are in HFF. Those guys, I mean, they're still all suited up and but yeah, it's different. I feel bad for them.
Oh, it's a different world. Yeah, the custom suit world's been hit pretty hard.
Remember Corporate Traditions? Do you remember that store?
Yes.
Corporate Traditions.
Where were they?
It was like, I bet Staubach accounted for 50 to 100 grand a year revenue for them. They were a little store like off of Stemmons.
Yeah.
They were like in an old Stemmons building, and it was like office space and suits, ties. I mean, it was and Gates, Cackley, all those guys introduced me to Corporate Traditions. Yeah. And then the Tom Jameses of the world were calling on you. And but my ties just hang in my room now.
Oh, God.
Collecting dust.
I got a wedding Friday, so I'm like, am I have to put a tie on?
I don't even do the tie on the wedding anymore, like pocket square. Mm-hmm. That's how you jazz it up.
Funeral, you got to go tie.
Funeral, you got to go tie.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Man, those are great stories. Jeff, what was like the turning point of your career? Like first big deal, big break, like, big commission.
I really did get lucky. So I started in tenant rep in 2002. I had been in the finance side of Staubach Company for a few years. And I remember going on a dove hunt at Rick Douglas. Rick was the COO of Staubach, and he hosted an annual dove hunt with all different people from around the industry. And like Ron Kirk was there one year, and Jake Ragusa was at KDC. He was there. It was a mix of Rick's friends. And I was driving with Jake, actually. Jake and I were driving down there together. And I remember thinking to myself, I have no idea how we get paid. Like literally. And he's talking about commissions, and I don't even know what the commission is. Like I know we get paid when a lease gets signed, but I don't know what the percent. Like I know nothing, and I was scared to ask. And so the first market survey I ran for Sellner, you'd get it was old school, right? You get a blank spreadsheet, print it, and it had the building names, and then you started calling, and you call Matt Kraft when he was at Crow, you call Jeff Eckert. And you call, Chris Taylor and all these guys, and you'd say, hey, this is Jeff. I'm working with Brad. We're representing XYZ company. What do you have in Centura Tower, right? Okay, we've got the third and fourth floor available. Yep. What are the rates? What are the, TIs? And then there was a column FF&E. And you would say, is there any FF&E available? And they would say yes or no. And you just it's like a Y or an N. For like 3 or 4 market surveys, I didn't know what FF&E stood for. And I was afraid to ask. So I would just say, do you have any FF&E available? Not even knowing what that meant. And finally, I was like, man, Google wasn't like it is today. Right. And so finally, I think I finally asked Sellner, I'm like, hey man, I don't even know what FF&E stands for. He's like, you idiot. And I'm like, and so I learned how you got paid. Yeah. But I had my first or second year in the business, I knew a guy. I coached the Jesuit baseball team one fall and one of the players' dad was an attorney, and just started talking to him, made friends with him, still friends with him, met with him not long ago. And his son's Michael Groobs from the Ticket, if you know Groobs. So I coached Groobs when he was like 15, and all of a sudden Mike needed a full floor expansion at Godwin Gruber at the time. And I'm like, oh, I think we can help with that. And so I grabbed Selner and we did a full floor deal like my second year, and everyone's like, how did Carl was the law firm guy downtown, and this was a law firm downtown. And Carl's like, how'd I miss that deal? But
We weren't coaching baseball.
That's right. Yeah. He should have been out there coaching catchers. So that was kind of the first win.
Carl had done well enough by that
he was fine.
point.
He might not even do a full floor. Like, one floor is probably wasn't big enough for Carl back then. And so I worked on that account forever, and then again it was just constantly hitting numbers, and what I send to young brokers now is there's a guy named Tim Allard who's a close friend, and Tim is a strategy, planning, life coach type guy, and not in like a cheesy way. Tim and I probably talk 2 or 3 times a week still, and he worked for Staubach and then stayed on with JLL, and he would coach brokers. And I remember Brad Selner, when I took over the tenant rep group, Brad told me, he's like, hey, you ought to work with Tim. And I'm like, who's Tim? And he, in a nice way, kind of critiqued my style and was like, hey, Tim can help you this, that. And at first I was kind of offended, like, are you telling me I need help? Which I did. And Tim has a great program for brokers, and we had a score sheet, and you would create activities, and they could be unique to you, and then some of them were not unique, and you would score them, right? So a cold call, a meeting, a signed lease, a signed services agreement, all these things. And then you could add in personal things like, working out, eating healthy, and each one had a score. And by the end of the week, you had to have 30 points, call it.
Yeah.
Right? And it didn't matter how you got there, right? If you made
That's pretty cool.
50 cold calls at half a point each or whatever they were, and at the end of the week, you had to have those points. And it didn't matter if it was Labor Day weekend. It didn't matter if you were on vacation, right? You had to figure out how to get those points. And over time, when you do it over and over, you look up and you're like, okay, you made that cold call because on Friday at 2, or you set the lunch Friday at the last minute because you needed 3 points to have lunch with a leasing broker. Right? Like meeting with a leasing broker was low points, but it was still valuable because they would give you intel.
Yeah, you get intel.
And it was a great way to track, kind of how to get the top achiever, which was a certain revenue threshold, how to get to this, how to get to that. And it took, I think my dad has said a million times, spectacular results come from unspectacular preparation. And if you talk to guys who have been successful at any level, at anything, it's like, oh yeah, I did that. And, in the off season I did this. And, when I was home at night, I would, go through my email and flag things to follow up in the morning or do this or do that. And people just don't know what's happening in the background.
Yeah.
I'd say it's like running a marathon, right? You don't go out and run 26 miles in 3 hours. You start, and it takes a while.
Sure.
You can't, what sports teaches you is you can't, and the Navy, I'm sure, is you can't cram, right? For some reason, when we're all in college, we think 3 nights before the test, we can get ready for it. And when we got to school, we had to run 2 miles was like our fitness test for baseball. And you can't cram for that, right? Like you have to be running all summer or you're going to bomb it, right? That's right? But for some reason in the academic world, we thought, oh yeah, we can just 3 nights before do that paper.
Yeah.
And so athletes, I think, and there's a lot of athletes in the business, in the real estate business, tons at Staubach. Tons of athletes, because you can take criticism, you can take rejection. These things you've dealt with. But one of the things is, hey, it takes time.
For sure.
Like, you can't get to that level by, just making a cold call on Friday and getting hired on Monday. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole competitive spirit and getting to that level of where you're playing college sports, if you know how hard it took to get to that level, and if you take those same principles and you apply them to the business world, you can be highly successful. And especially in a business like commercial real estate where you hear so many no's, right? But if you just keep repping.
Keep repping. Don't take it personal.
Yeah.
I was laughing when Jeff was talking about the FF&E comment and being new in the business.
You got one too?
Well, thankfully for me, Jeff and Josh White were kind of my when I got
heroes.
Heroes. But when I got into the business and I didn't know what some term was, or I got stuck on didn't know what certain lease language was or whatever.
Sure.
They were the two
subrogation.
They were the two guys I could go to with all my stupid questions.
Yeah.
And what's TI stand for? What's funny is most people don't have a training.
No,
but I can.
It's horrible in commercial real estate.
The other comparison that I made to sports was, if anyone has shown up in college for a sport, they tell you nothing. It's the weirdest thing. Like you show up and you don't know where the laundry goes, and no one tells you.
No, you're right.
It's like in that scene in A Few Good Men where he's like, "Hey, where's the cafeteria?" And they're like, "Why is it not in the book?" It's not in the book. Like you just figure it out.
Yeah.
And so all these things you just have to figure out. But one thing JL or Staubach did was we had a lease before there was like lease review classes online or official. There was a guy named Greg Burns, and Burnsy was, joined Staubach when I was like 10, and he would do a lease course. Yeah. And it was like 3 days a week at 7 a.m. And Brant, Blake Anderson, and I were in it together. The three of us were in it together, and you'd show up, and Greg had a lease. You'd go through 10 pages at a time, highlight things, notice things, and because none of us were lawyers, and you're just kind of expected to know that stuff. And if you don't have someone telling you, or you don't feel that you can go to somebody and say, "Hey, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what does this mean?" And where's I remember I told this story the other day, my very first building tour, I was in the business for like 2 months, and we had the head of real estate, Ken O'Gara. I don't know how I remember his name, Ken O'Gara at Pepsi or Frito-Lay, one of them. And he was coming in town. He wanted to tour all their sites, touch all the Pepsi, Frito-Lay sites, kind of look at them, go to dinner, go back to New York, whatever. So Larry Toon says to me, "Hey, I want you to come on this tour." Great. I'll learn a lot. We're walking to the parking lot, and he hands me the keys. He's like, "You're driving." And so if I were to say to you, "Hey, Conrad, take me to, Legacy Center," right? You'd do it, right? Or go to the Lincoln Center, go to Preston Center, right? Go to 8333 Preston, right? Like you'd figure it out. I had no idea. Right. And so Larry's like, "All right, Jeff, we're going to, we're going to this, building." I'm like, "Larry, I don't even know what that is. Like, I don't know where Preston and, Hedgecock's is." Like,
pre-Google Maps.
Yeah, pre-Google Maps.
Yeah, Maps go days,
No
bro.
GPS in your pocket. Like, and so we're driving all over the place. I was sweating, and it's classic Larry. Larry's just like, there's no map, there's no spreadsheet. It's just like, okay, let's hit the Frito-Lay plant on Regal Row. And I'm like, Where's Regal Row? Right? and so like that, I remember when I started scheduling tours myself for Brad or for Carl or for Paul, I would call the broker and say, "Okay, 2:15, we're going to be at your building. Tell me like I've never driven a car before." Right. Okay. You exit Trinity Mills, you go through the first light, take the first curb cut into the building, and we'll meet you in the lobby. Right. Great. Yeah. Because the worst is when you drive by and you're like, "There's the building."
And I
wanted to show you guys.
And then the office world, like, where's the leasing parking and all the parking garages?
This complex, right?
Oh, yeah.
This complex. Are you in, Galleria 1
or
Galleria 1's in the middle, right?
Yeah, I know.
1's in the middle, 2 is on the end, 3 is on this end, right? And so, we're in Galleria 3. I remember even driving up here today. I'm like 13155. What building is that? I don't even know what building that is.
I used to drive. You would go pre-drive
it
for sure.
Yeah, I was the that was a Thielen thing.
Yeah.
Steve Thielen pre-drove it like when he was 20 years in the business.
Yeah.
He was so, so diligent.
So, yeah.
I mean, and I'm like, I'll figure it out tomorrow.
Once you've done it, though, enough, like, you don't need to pre-drive anymore. But
Right.
yes, when you go to different towns, that's when it gets real interesting.
Right.
That's when it's nice, though, to have the local broker help you out with,
Yeah.
hey, you drive, I'll sit in the back with the client.
But when you're young, you don't know.
No.
You don't know that everybody was there. Right. And so you're afraid to ask questions.
Sure.
You're afraid to sound. And then I had a legacy, too. I mean, I was in a different position. People just assumed I knew real estate. Well, my dad and I really didn't talk real estate. I mean,
Sure.
I didn't go on building tours with him when I was 12,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, my brother-in-law was running the group, and I'm like, help me out on this. And
Jeff, did you know that you wanted to get into real estate growing up?
I didn't. I considered coaching at one time. And when I was a senior in college, I had interned for the Staubach. It wasn't called Staubach Capital. It was like Staubach Financial Services. SFS was a brand new division in the mid to late 90s at Staubach, doing advising for clients. A lot of them were clients of the tenant rep group that needed help. Maybe they owned a building and they're going to do a synthetic lease, or do a sale lease back or something different. And we were always user only. So we weren't representing landlords, but you could represent a landlord if they were the user of the building and help them. And the guy's name was Brant Bryan, and he called me my senior year, and because I was playing baseball in the summer, so it was hard to have like a real internship because I'd have to leave like at 4, to get to Arlington for a game or something. And so Brant called me. He's like, "Hey, we're starting this new group. You want to come work for it?" And it was a kind of a division of Staubach on the principal side.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Yeah, great." And so I went to work for him, and I remember Alicia Ragusa, Holt at the time, was running the tenant rep group, and she asked me one day in the office, like, "Why didn't you come work for us?" I'm like, I kind of nicely said, "Well, you never called. Like, you didn't. If she would have called me, I probably would have gone there." And my dad never brought it up. Never brought up football. Me playing football. Never brought up. I mean, he was kind of like, if that's what he wants to do, great. And my sister ended up being GC of Staubach, so we were there working together. But it was never something that Dad pushed or wanted me to do. And I never worked like for him. He was like 9 spots on the totem pole above me. Never had to go to HR or anything.
Steven, what was your like breakthrough moment in tenant rep? Like your first big deal that you remember, and you're like, "Wow, this is pretty good."
There were. I think
Parker.
I'd love to tell a brief Parker story.
Oh boy!
But I referenced earlier that the receptionist with tip treats.
Yes.
That I think it really hit me when going from knocking on a law firm's door, kind of going through the process of getting past the receptionist and finally get a meeting, and several meetings later, and the real estate guy out of Atlanta came, and we pitched and we won, and it was Sellner and I and Forshee, and just the life cycle of a full floor law firm, and
uptown,
in uptown, and having just knocked on the door to get it. That was that was good moment. But going to
oh my God!
So there was a
we're not going to say his name, but it's
we're not going to say there was a group.
Okay.
I'll never forget.
Steven hustled hard to get this account. No one and their brother was calling on them. I mean, it was an off the radar group.
Interesting.
That
large
at one time was going to be
footprint.
like a monster campus in Plano. Like a big deal.
Okay.
So we'll call him the CEO. The CEO loved Roger. He loved celebrities in general, and Roger
His wall was covered with pictures of him and celebrities.
nothing but.
Got it.
And he loved Roger. And we pitched the business. We got hired. Jeff,
Remember the technology issues we had? We never could get it to work. Oh my God! It's
but
sweating.
we pitched the business. We got hired, and we could tell you a lot of really funny stories about spending time with that client. But the one story I'll tell you that I will never forget.
I hope it's the one I have in my head.
To the day I die. The CEO asked me, he goes, do you think you can get Roger to speak at our Veterans Day lunch? And Roger's like, yeah, we got hired, right?
Oh, God,
of course I will. And so Jeff and I and Roger get, and this is like months in advance. So Veterans Day rolls around.
Yep.
They're going to have this huge lunch honoring veterans, other employees, and Roger's going to be the keynote.
Okay.
So myself, Jeff, Roger, we drive to their office, and we're getting out of the car. And as we're walking in, Roger, if you know, like Roger's sense of humor, it's very dry. Like you never really tell.
Right.
So he turns to me, he goes, hey, something to the effect of, you may remember it differently. He's like, hey, since you're kind of just out of the Navy, more in tune like with today's veteran, I'm probably going to just ask you to speak as well. And I'm like, I looked at Jeff like, is he serious? And Jeff was like, I don't know.
I'm not speaking.
And so we walk in here and they've got a screen football highlight, like Roger, Heisman, films running of him playing football. And it's Roger everywhere. Big stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steven Holley.
So they go through the program. Roger gets up there and he probably spoke for, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes. And then he's like, Steven, why don't you get up here and tell them about your experience? And like, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. Like, everyone was like, who in the hell is this guy?
28 years old or something.
Yeah.
35.
And so here's what I got up there and dead silent.
And you probably hadn't done much public speaking.
Oh,
at this
very
point.
little.
And it's luckily for him, it's like pre-iPhone. So I'm not filming it. Like if it was today's world, I would have filmed it all and the whole company would have had it 30 seconds later.
But Roger introduced me as, hey, Steven went to the Naval Academy, played football, Navy SEAL, just out of the Navy. We hired him, whatever. He's working for us now. Why don't you come up here and talk about your experience? And so I was like, okay.
This
so
is happening.
So I walk up there and I'm thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And I said, yeah, I'm the other Naval Academy quarterback at JLL that no one's ever heard of. Nothing.
Bombs. Nothing.
Nothing. I was like,
Yeah.
but I will never forget that to the day I die.
He thought it was going to kill.
You thought he was going to kill?
No, the other. So
So good,
the
though,
story.
Steven.
The story I thought he was going to tell is during the pitch. So we're in this room in like a U-shaped table with their entire board, and they had a very unique board, to say the least. One of the guys is falling asleep, like he's asleep. No kidding.
No, literally, he's snoring.
He's asleep in the meeting. So we're going, and then
I forgot that.
Yeah. So the CEO wants everyone to introduce themselves, right? So it's like, hi, I'm Conrad Madsen.
Sure.
I'm involved with this company because whatever. Next guy. Well, it gets to the CEO, and he tells a story like, I mean, he's the second coming, right? I mean, he's talking about his life, his accomplishments. I mean, it is, and he's a great guy and he's accomplished.
Yeah.
But like, if I told you his name, you've not heard of this guy. It's not like, Rex Tillerson or something.
Yeah, right.
So he's just talking about how great he is. Next up is my dad. And he goes, well, I won the Heisman.
After this guy went on for like 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That was Roger.
He's like, well, I won the Heisman. And that was like,
So
it.
good.
Right.
That's all you needed to say.
Right. Yeah, it was
Mic
hilarious.
drop.
And he never, I mean, like, that's a very rare, like, he doesn't do
that.
He doesn't brag. He doesn't do ego
Right.
stuff. But
Right.
oh my God, it was funny. We were
But
just
this
like,
guy just went on and
Oh,
on
my
and
gosh.
and on. And, oh, God, that's
Golly,
so
and
good.
we won't get into it, but do you remember we went to
I was not at the dinner.
oh my gosh.
The dinner was,
We went to a dinner, Josh and I and Tori, I believe, were invited to a dinner at the CEO's house or some
like board dinner.
board dinner. And it went off the rails. It was very, very
Yeah, like HR would have been called 5 or 6 times. I mean,
But anyway,
it was interesting.
a lot of funny memories working with these.
And we
guys.
never made any money.
No.
Nothing happened with that. deal.
Nothing.
Nope.
No, those are always the best stories.
They really are. They really are.
Yeah, but like we were talking, a buddy of mine was asking me about some funny real estate stories. And the one thing that always makes, and you may have experienced this, the amount of times that people try and, I don't know what the end game is, but like fake users.
Yeah.
And like Josh and I had a user one time, came through a network, and I mean, it was going to be like a 500,000 square foot industrial requirement with office and all this stuff, and everything seemed to check out when we're having. I remember we went to Starbucks in Plano with this guy, and we're like, "Holy, like, wow, this is like out of nowhere, like manna from heaven," and he was just like total fraud.
So bizarre.
And he got a like free coffee out of it. It was the crazy. I mean, we took him on a couple building tours, and you know, we didn't put it on our whip. Like you never put money on there unless it's like sure. Yeah. But I mean, JLL had stories. One time Hillwood was flying a guy around in a helicopter that was going to have this massive, technology company, and again, he checked out. Everything seemed to be right, and the guy just disappeared.
That's the world we live in.
Makes it fun.
It does make it fun.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about what you guys are up to today. Steven, I'd love, before we get into kind of what you're doing in the commercial real estate space, I mean, let's talk about Carry the Load and this amazing organization that you created, 12, 13 years ago?
The dumbest idea ever in 2011.
Yeah, we're coming up on 15
years.
15 years next year. Yeah, so Carry the Load, myself, we were talking a little bit before we started about Clint Bruce, who he and I served together in the SEAL teams. We started Carry the Load in 2011 in Dallas, and not coincidentally, I was at JLL at the time working with Jeff and Josh and some others. And so this event comes around, and it's going to be this 20-hour walk at White Rock Lake.
Okay.
And
how hard could that be?
Yeah, how hard could walk in 20 hours be? And we go out there, and there's a couple hundred people, and again, it was a very informal team, but it was Jeff, and it was Josh, and it was
Josh's brother.
Yes, and it was Steven Schmidt. Schmidt was out there,
Schmidt.
And
we have a photo of it.
We went out there and walked for 50.
It was almost 50 miles, right?
Yeah, it was crazy, and it was physically, mentally, it was tough. And
how many hours does that take?
20. It was 20 hours and 11 minutes for
2011.
So it started at 4 to noon, right?
4 to noon 11.
4 to noon, yeah.
Yeah, and but anyway, the growth that came out of that, it's funny that we're sitting here talking today, but Jeff being on that original in that original group that did that, yeah, it's grown. We were in 48 different states.
So hold on, let's take it back a little bit. So this is an event like for a separate organization.
No,
brand new.
This is Carry the Load inaugural event.
There might have been.
You came up with this idea,
Clint and myself, and there was Scott Rohrman, who I office with today. He was one of the original 3 or 4 sitting around a table. That again, Clint came to say we want. I want to do an event where we can, remember the men and women who've made the ultimate sacrifice. And as we got into it, of course, he and I wanted it to be grueling and
right. But also part of it was to change the theme of Memorial Day from, mattresses and cars and barbecues to, hey, let's think for a minute about why you get Monday off.
No doubt.
That's how it started.
Okay.
And,
it was White Rock Lake.
We were walking. Again, that's a 9-10 mile loop.
Right.
So, there was a couple hundred people out there, but you didn't see most of them because you're always in different areas of the lake. And
you didn't cross.
Yeah.
It's very different from the Katy Trail today and River Shawn. And there's a lot of fellowship, a lot of interaction.
Right.
completely.
Well, and now you're doing it from coast to coast.
So
and it's all, yeah.
What do you think were there for the opening ceremonies? Like 300, 400?
yeah, somewhere in there.
And then I think how many finished? I mean, how many went the whole time? Like 40, 50?
Something like that.
Okay.
But I mean, that like you mentioned Goggins earlier, that was one of those moments where, at about 3 a.m, you don't want to be there.
Oh, I'm sure.
One, you're walking around White Rock at 3 a.m. But you kind of think, and with Steven there and Clint and others, you're thinking, okay, if they can do what they've done, and we could be talking about them today, posthumously versus them here.
Right.
You're like, okay, I can't quit.
Tell them quickly the story about you, because you went from there to
Oh God, yeah.
Duke, right?
So
This is
So we didn't think it would be a big deal. We didn't prepare. Like we had one pair of shoes, we had one pair of socks.
Like, gonna go walk.
right.
How hard could
Don't
this
need
be?
a Band-Aid for anything.
No, I mean we're like finding duct tape and so we finish, and I remember my parents were out there. Jenny and the kids came out at the closing ceremonies, and then we went to. I remember going to Snuffers in Preston Center for lunch, and then I tried to pry my eyes open until 8 or 9 o'clock because you didn't want to fall asleep at 2 and then p.m. and wake up. So go to bed, wake up, and I mean the next morning I'm like, oh my God, I got a problem. My feet are destroyed. I mean blisters beyond terrible, and swelling and all this other stuff. And just coincidentally, the end of that week is Coach K camp, which is a basketball fantasy camp at Duke. And I had never done Coach K camp. I don't even know if I was old. You had to be 35 to do it. And I was convinced by a guy, you have to do it. It's the greatest experience. So I'm like, great. So I signed up for it. Well, I'm I can barely walk. I can't wear dress shoes. And I think it was Thursday I fly to Durham. And the first day is practice. And they take all the players. You got your name on your back of your jersey. And you're just playing pickup ball, and the coaches are all watching and scouting, and then they draft their teams and they try and make them even, right? But they're watching you, and they're like, okay, he's good or he's not good, and there's the highest level is probably a D3 type player, and then the lowest level is can't make a layup and walk and chew gum. Really, it is that bad, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I can run, but I'm banged up. So the next morning, I go to the trainer and Jose, and I'm like, man, I got problem. I got my feet are banged up, and he's like, all right, let's look at them. So I take off my shoes, and it is like hamburger meat, blisters everywhere, blood in my sock, and he thinks it's from the day before. Oh my God, you're out of shape. You just showed up here. I'm like, no, this is from Monday. So he is patching me up every day. And Clint and this idiot, I'm texting them or email, whatever it was, maybe a BlackBerry back then. And I'm like, I hate you. This is miserable. I'm sending pictures of my feet. And one of them says, get some tincture of benzoin. And I'm like, what's that?
That was probably me.
Yeah.
I live and die by that.
And so tincture of benzoin is, they don't even have it in most drugstores. I get it on Amazon now, but so I tell Jose, I'm like, hey, do you have tincture of benzoin? He's like, no, I can get it. I'm like, okay. So he calls whoever, and the next day he has it. And I'm like, okay, they told me to put it on my blisters. No problem. Great. So it's called the hot shot, by the way, is the term for it. So I get on my hands and knees. I got my feet on the end of the training table, facing backwards. And he rubs a Q-tip with it, right? And he starts putting tincture benzoin on the raw skin. It's the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. It burns so bad.
It's like someone sticking you with a hot poker.
It's like you're getting branded. And I am biting a towel, screaming at Steven and Clint. But what's amazing is it fixes you. It's just really painful.
It's just really painful.
And so the next day I got a little better, but then I ended up getting a stress fracture. I was in a boot a week later.
Oh.
But we won. We were we were the first team to go undefeated in Coach K history.
Coach K camp.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember I sent them an email. I've got it stored somewhere, like in carry the load folder or something. And by like the second or third day, people were like, "Man, are you okay?" Because I couldn't really walk, but I'd get warmed up. They'd take me up, and once you get warmed up, unless you have like a real injury, you can kind of go. So I could go pretty hard in the game, and then I would be like in the training room, and these guys were like, "What happened? Like, what did you do?" And I was like, "I walked 50 miles on Sunday." And they were like, "Oh, what? Why did you do that?" And so I told them the story, but it was tough.
The 20-hour walk was a one and done.
No. It's our flagship event in Dallas. Every year is 20 hours. Again, you've got the vast majority of participation is not out there for that length of time, but you have people walking all night for different reasons.
Somebody tried to do 100 miles one year, right?
Yeah. But we've got 5 different relays that all crisscross the U.S. and then they culminate in. I think in the last 14 years, we're coming up close to $50 million that we've raised for other nonprofits. So it's
incredible.
It's been quite the journey.
I think my group did it 3 years where we went all night.
Yeah.
But it was a lot easier at the Katy Trail.
Yeah.
Because people would stop at we did like 30 miles that year, right? We didn't do 50. And you take longer breaks. You hit the ice house
Stop
for last
in the
call.
ice house a little bit.
We were at the ice house one year, maybe the second year, and we go in there at like 1:40 a.m. and come off the trail, and we're all sweaty and gross. And there were some pretty big like SEAL team guys, like not the guys that don't look like Steven, like enlisted guys, like big arms, tattoos, everything. Right. So we all go in there.
Was that a kind of a sleight of hand by him? Just a backwards?
No, they weren't like good looking, handsome real estate guys. And so Tommy Hicks, my buddy Tommy's in there, and he's like, I got the tab, right? Like I'm buying beers for 10, 12 guys or whatever. Yeah. And so he swipes his card. They bring out some beers, and then they bring out a second round, and it's like 2 now. It's like 2:01, and the manager's like, "Hey guys, like it's last call, time to go." And this guy, I wish I met him, like got to know him or met his name. He puts his arm on the manager, and he's like, "We're not leaving yet." And the guy goes, "Okay." He walks like 10 feet away and just stands there and looks at us, and then we ended, and this was before, to-go drinks were allowed.
Right. And
so then everyone starts like pouring it in a styro or a solo cup to walk out. And he's like, "Hey, you guys you can't do that." And this guy looks at him and he's like, "Okay, go ahead." Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Incredible.
Yeah. It's been quite the journey.
I mean,
I think the second and third year I got to park by the park because I raised enough money or he gave me a parking pass.
Right.
But then by the third or fourth year, I'm like Ubering down there because there's nowhere to park. The parking garage is full.
I mean, how many people are there
like
on Memorial Day now?
Yeah, I think, between opening and closing ceremony, we'll have, the fire department tells us we have anywhere from 20 to 25 between those two.
That's incredible.
Those kind
of. The best is, the funniest part about Carry the Load in probably the third or fourth year, not now, is you'd be out there walking and then some joker decides it's his day to like rollerblade at 18 miles an hour or bike at 22 miles an hour. And you're like, dude, it's the wrong day.
Yeah.
You can't do the Katy Trail on Memorial Day. So I think that's over with.
Yeah.
But you'd be out there at 6 a.m. on Monday, and cyclists would come out, and they're like, "On your right." You're like, "Dude, this is not the day."
Not the day.
Yeah.
You really can't hardly do that on the Katy Trail.
No.
Normal hours now.
No,
it's
right.
so busy. Unless you're walking or jog. I remember back in the early days, like you could ride your bike all the time, but now it's
nope,
too busy now.
But yeah, the first year was lonely because you were like, I was with my 4 or 5 guys, and that's it. Now you can, you're passing people, talking to people.
Sure.
There were no aid stations other than the start finish line, right?
I think we had one. I think on the other side, complete opposite side of the lake.
My favorite story from that.
Tincture.
Oh, don't do it. my favorite story is we're out walking, Schmidt and Josh and his brother, and maybe Forshy was with us at the time, and we're walking around, and we were like, man, we're not going to make it back to 7-Eleven in time. They're like, what do you mean? I said, they stopped selling beer at midnight. So we reversed course and went backwards, and we got to 7-Eleven at like 11:58. We bought I think we each bought one tall boy, and we sat on the levee and took our shoes and socks off, and it was like, the greatest beer I've ever had in my life.
That's a good story. That's a good story. Let's talk quickly about what you guys are up to today. Steven, tell me a little bit about what you're doing these days.
You bet. Started Holley Development Company back in April, and I'm focused on speculative industrial, primarily here in the short term in DFW, but also looking around Austin. That's a market.
Yep.
Previously when I was at Stillwater with projects in DFW and Austin, those are two markets that I know the best. So that's where I am today, and have got 3 different projects under contract or land sites under contract in various stages of pre-development. A couple here in the Metroplex, and then one down in New Braunfels.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where me and you really got connected, was when you got over to Stillwater. I'd always heard of you, and then you jumped into the industrial world, and then started picking my brain, and
you bet.
And now we've become buddies, and it's been awesome to see your journey through Stillwater, and now I'm super excited to see the next step, buddy. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely.
Jeff, what are you up to these days?
Well, I was at Staubach JLL for almost 20 years, kind of tented both, which we were talking about the merger acquisition. It was 16. I can't believe it was 16 years ago.
Isn't it wild?
And I know just via my kids, like I see my kids' ages, I'm like, God, I can't believe it's been that long. At the end of 17, kind of middle of 17, I decided to, kind of go out on my own, not in brokerage. I didn't want to compete with JLL or, my buddies. And so in January of 18, started Staubach Capital, and we are a private equity real estate shop. I mean, we're small, but we have about $350 million of equity out. Wish it was less, just because we haven't had any turns because of the market. 22 and 23 were going to be big years for us, and they weren't from an exit perspective.
Yep.
And we didn't do a fund. It's not a family office. There's some, people think we're LPs and a family office. We're not that at all. And so we find people like Steven that will partner with and be part of the GP and bring equity, manage all the investors. We have about 500 active investors, and we look at everything. I mean, that's the biggest reason I didn't do a fund. I didn't think I could raise enough to make it meaningful anyway, without any skins on the wall. And we wanted to be able to do anything we want. So if an industrial deal pops up, if we did a retail deal this summer, we've got self-storage.
Done a lot of multifamily.
Most
single family.
Most of our money is in multifamily and single family for rent, and then the rest we call other. But it's still about $100 million in other. Self-storage we like. We have a great partner, Rod Hines Capital, and it's it's never a dull moment. We were talking about kind of our end of the year pipeline. We'll have one more multifamily deal, and then I kind of want to try and slow it down in December, because last year we were just full speed ahead on an industrial deal all through the holidays and January.
Yeah. Now we just need Jeff to figure out how to buy the Cowboys, right?
To only $10 billion.
Is that the price?
I don't think he would even sell for that number.
No, I don't think so.
Why? I mean, there's but I think he'll sell 10% with that new rule the NFL just put in, where you can sell up to 10% to private equity.
Yeah. He wasn't real happy on the ticket.
No.
105.3 the fan yesterday.
I wouldn't be.
Yeah. It's been a bad run. Like 30 years of a bad run.
That's all.
We're not going to get deep into the Cowboys trying to fix them, but
one of my favorite projects is actually with the Joneses, and they are a phenomenal partner. We've got a multifamily high rise across from the Star, and it's been a great success. And the brand is still unbelievable. 12 Cowboys way is doing great.
Yeah, no, for sure. What's on the future hit other than development? Anything else exciting you got going on these days?
A lot of kids sports.
Yeah.
Obviously, son playing football in college. I got a daughter who's volleyball player in high school who's
We getting those Scully offers? Are those coming in?
She actually committed to go play volleyball at Brown.
Wow.
And then I got 3 younger boys, younger being 6th grade, 5th grade, that are all knee deep. So
Yeah.
kids sports and work.
Jeff, are yours all out of
I've got a junior at Ursuline, a sophomore at Baylor, and a junior at TCU. So the youth sports are kind of over.
Yeah. Getting your life back.
Yeah, and our little one, she works like every Saturday and Sunday at St. Bernard. So, like, I'm kind of sitting there watching college football on a Saturday, going, what, "Am I okay? Am I doing everything right?"
Yeah.
But it's kids. It's an interesting point in life when your kids go off, and even though they're not far away, it's changes things, and
Sure does.
you miss them a lot.
Well, your dad's a legend in this industry. What would you say is the best piece of advice he's ever given to you, Jeff?
I mean, there's millions, and I always tell people it's not just him. My mom doesn't get the recognition publicly that as a mother and wife, and
Sure.
but their whole thing was like, don't lie, cheat, and steal, right? Kind of basic stuff.
Right.
Integrity was like number one for him. And I mean, I would tell you the best advice, and not really advice, but just an example, is as parents and husband and wife, is by far the most important, right? I mean, business is great, and
Sure.
but having that example for us, I've got 4 sisters, and I've got on my parents' side of the family 15 nieces and nephews, and to me that's kind of the magic. I mean, we all get along and get together, and it works, and they did a great job as parents, and that there was never a moment, no matter what I would have done, and I was a pretty good kid, but no matter what, they loved us and would be there for us and take care of us to this day. And they're 82, and if I called them and had something going on, and they would jump to it, and no matter what, right? I mean, luckily they didn't have to ever bail me out of jail, but they would have probably. My mom would have been there for sure.
Still early though.
Yeah, it's not over yet.
It's not over.
Jury's out.
Yeah. Stephen, was going to the Naval Academy probably the best thing that ever happened to you, or what do you think?
It was, great decision as an 18-year-old kid, and obviously wouldn't have. Obviously, I think professionally, my life would look a lot different if I hadn't gone down that path and had the opportunities to go to work for companies like Staubach Company.
Sure.
Out of the Navy. So
the one story again, not advice, just an example. I was on a hunting trip with a father-son trip 20 plus years ago, and the young guys, the boys, didn't know his full story about serving in the Navy and going to the academy and coming out as a 27-year-old rookie and having 3 kids, and very different than today's sports. And someone had asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, I had to do this," and he said, "I was actually eligible for the draft early because he did a year of prep school, and at the Naval Academy, you can leave after your sophomore year. There's a free out, and I think they call it 2 for 7. Is that what it's called?"
Yeah, after you first day you sit down in your class junior year,
you're locked in for 7 years.
Yeah.
So 2 more years of college, 5-year commitment.
Got it.
But up till that point, you can leave. No, you don't owe them anything.
Interesting.
And it's probably good for people that it's not a fit. And unfortunately, it's going to be really bad for sports, because if you're really good as a sophomore, someone's going to come calling with NIL money, and a long story there. And so my dad's telling the story, and he had an opportunity to leave early, and go play pro football.
Yeah.
And this young guy sitting next to me just was like perplexed, and he's like, why didn't you do that? And I remember he was at the end of the table and he looked the kid straight in the eye and he goes, because I made a commitment to the Navy.
Right.
And that was it. Like,
sure.
You know, and I remember thinking,
well, that's that generation too.
Right. But like, you know, if you do what you say you're going to do, like that, it wasn't an option. Right. I mean, there was no, you know, it didn't even cross his mind that, hey, I can get out of this and go live this life. And you look back on it and that was clearly the right decision.
Yeah.
And I told my son and I were talking about tough decisions, and I said, you know, you're gonna have a lot of tough decisions, and you're gonna look back on them, and you probably know what the right path is, but it's maybe a lot harder than the other path. But if you choose it, you're gonna look back on it and say, man, that was
better decision.
You know, tough decision. But
What was the most your dad ever made in a single season, salary wise?
We were actually just talking about that. So Dak makes more in one game than he made in his entire career by a lot. By like maybe 2x.
So ridiculous.
I think his last year was like 250.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it's a lot of money in 1979.
Sure.
But his first year was like 25 grand.
Yeah.
You know, I think when they won the Super Bowl, he got like a $10,000 bonus or something, and he got a car. I think he got a car. I'm sure you can Google it somewhere, but he was given a sports car for like Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
And he traded it in for a station wagon. Like he's like, I don't need a sports car. Like we need a station wagon. Yeah, different time, you know.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah, Dave Richards was in here. We were chatting last week, and Dave, like his rookie season, I think he made $85,000. You know?
Mm-hmm. And he was like big time. Yeah. He'd be like a $30-40 million contract guy.
I did not know he was National High School Player of the Year.
Yeah, he was a big deal
back in the day.
Yeah, he was as big as he is now. Like then, as a high school kid. I mean, absolute monster.
Yes, and he's the one who spearheaded free agency for when he was at the Chargers. He was the team rep, and we talked all about that. Changed the game.
Last story. Sorry, one more.
Okay.
So Dave Richards, we worked together at JLL, and I mean, biggest dude I've ever been around. I mean, like, you know,
big boy.
He's a big man. And we were walking back. We were in Phoenix at a JLL event, annual event, and we're walking back from the concert to our rooms, and Dave's about 5-10 feet in front of me. And I look at my buddies, you might probably were there, and I go, Dave Richards Rodeo. And they're like, Dave Richards Rodeo? What's that? I go, I'm going to jump on his back and see if I can stay on for 8 seconds. So I'm like 200 pounds, right? Like I'm not like it's, you know, a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So I run and I jump on his back, like hands around his neck, legs around his waist, doesn't even budge. Not even, it's like jumping on a tree. Yeah. And he goes like this. He looks at me and he goes, what are you doing?
What are you doing, little man?
And I go, Dave Richards Rodeo. I'm going to see if I can hang on for 8 seconds. I got off quickly, but I mean, it was like jumping on a car.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
big dude.
Yeah.
Good dude.
Yeah. He told me a funny Landry story. I'll share it for this episode, but Landry told him before draft day that he was not going to make it in the NFL. And so when the Cowboys were in Thousand Oaks and the Chargers were in California as well during, fall camp, they scrimmaged. And he's like, that day, it was my personal mission to prove to Landry that he made a mistake. And he's like, I had to go up against Randy White and Too Tall. And he said Too Tall was so hard because of like just those arms. But he's like, I literally went with everything I had. And he goes, Landry had a guy on his staff who I guess was kind of in charge of like strength training. I forget the guy's name right now, Jeff. You probably know, but
Bob Ward
probably was. And he trained with Bob in the off season. Dave did here in Dallas because he's from Dallas. And he said that Bob turned to Landry that day and was like, maybe you were wrong about that Dave Richards kid. And he said Landry looked at him, he goes, I think I was.
Yeah. Crazy.
Anyhow, I just thought that was a great story. Dave was an amazing player.
I got to get.
Yeah, boys, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for
today.
having us.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
It's awesome.